Hi, my name is Jane Pitts, here again with Wedding Insights with the Tegman House. Wonderful to have you all back into our home again. Today we're here with our wedding coordinator expert. This is Crystal Wigfield. Welcome, Crystal. It's nice to have you. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
Crystal is with KMW Weddings and Events, and she has a total of 8 years of fantastic, wonderful experience to share with us today. So we're hoping that we're going to learn a lot from you today. I'm sure that we will.
Well, thanks. I hope to bring some insight for sure.
So first we want to start by wishing you congratulations on your two beautiful boys that you just recently have. They're how old now?
They'll be 4 months on the 8th.
And their names?
John and Everett.
And I've seen them on Facebook. They're quite, absolutely, they're quite munchable and adorable, by the way.
I would agree with that.
And you have a husband too, right?
I do. I have a husband.
and he helps. I heard you talk about earlier that he takes really good care of the babies and helps you as an amazing support.
He does. He's an incredible support. I really could not do any of this without him. Yeah. He is a really great partner.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
So let's just go ahead and dive right in, and we have lots of questions, lots of things to learn of what wedding coordinators have to offer. And so what made you realize, Crystal, that you wanted to be a wedding coordinator? What's the beginning of your story? How did that come to be?
It was a complete accident. It was not something that I sought out. It was actually, out of college, I was a dance major in college. Okay. So I have my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in production and pedagogy. So I was teaching dance at the time and waiting tables and just really trying to hustle and make ends meet. A girlfriend of mine was in the catering industry, so she was a catering director for a catering team that specialized in weddings. And she would tell me all the time, like, you would be so great as a planner. You really should look into being a wedding coordinator. You should really look into it. And I was like, I don't know. That's not something that I've ever really thought about. But she was encouraging me to at least check it out. So I went with her on site to one of her events and met the owners there at the venue. And it just so happened that they were looking for somebody, and we got along really great. And they offered me their position that they had available on site.
Oh, wow. So you started out as an on-site coordinator.
Yeah.
Just at that location to begin with.
Just at that location.
Okay, great way to start.
Yeah, and it was my first event that I had ever seen. I was there for about an hour, and they're like, do you want to do this? And I was like, I mean, sure, let's try this out.
Uncle, why not?
Yeah, let's just try it out. And so I started working for them. I was their in-house coordinator, and I started off doing a little bit of sales for them. I came in after their previous coordinator had started her own company. Okay. And she was a really good mentor for me for a few of the weddings where I was able to shadow her, so I learned a lot from her. But after, when she was like, okay, I'm done, I'm moving into just my company. Let me know if you need anything. And I was like, okay.
I'm on my own.
I'm on my own. I had been given the keys to the venue, and that was that.
Wow. So so you didn't go through any specialized training. You didn't have it. I really believe wedding coordinating, sales, the interacting with people, I really believe that it's a natural gift. Yeah. It is something that we can grow in, but I think it's something you either have it or you don't. Yeah. And having that insight and having the ability to navigate through difficult situations and, I think it takes you have that shine in your eye.
Yeah. Thank you.
And brides, the couples and the families see that. They see that positive.
Yeah. And I was like young. I was 22.
You were a baby.
I was a baby. And I was like, sure, I'll do whatever you need. What do you need? I'll do it.
And you have the energy.
Yes, I did. Well, I was a dance instructor, so I was used to the 3-year-olds crying in ballet because they just don't quite get it and it's time for a nap. So I was able to, I could navigate emotions and make sure that if we were having a little bit of meltdown, I knew how to pick them up. Not that brides are 3-year-olds, but they're highly emotional.
How long have you and your husband been married?
We got married in 2017.
Okay, so let me ask you this: when you got married, who did your wedding coordinating for you?
Her name was Jessica Knight with 36th Street Events. She's here in Austin. I actually flew her out to Florida. Oh, okay. Where I got married, and she did our month of coordination.
So you understand as a coordinator the importance.
So important. So important. She didn't do full planning with me because I was like, I got this. But we chose to do destination style. So whenever you do destination,
Okay.
first off, we were planning on doing it in Puerto Rico. And so what I learned is whenever they do things very differently there. If you're going to pick a venue there, say you want to go to the hotel. We had chosen a resort. You have to pick out catering and florals and your photographer. It all comes as a package deal.
Right.
So utilizing a planner to help with that didn't really make sense for us.
Right.
So we did that portion of it.
Right.
And then we wanted to bring in someone closer to the date to just
Where
help
you- yeah.
pick up where
You
I
could
couldn't
put
get.
your itinerary together and say, these are the things I need you to look for, make sure this person's here on time and this happens, and make
Oh
sure.
no, she did that for me.
Yeah, so I'm saying
Yeah.
the girl that you hired
Yes.
did that for you. Hired her in to do that part.
Exactly.
Yeah, very
I wanted
important.
her to have, as a coordinator myself, I understand how important it is for you to create all of that back of the.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you need to create your own schedule. You need to create your own vendor list. You need to create your own layouts. You need to be having all of the control and all of that.
Right.
So that you know, like on the wedding day, what's going on.
Absolutely. So when you hear a bride make a statement, and I've heard this as well, having been in the industry for over 20 years now, I think that I'm just going to do it on my own. I don't need a wedding coordinator. I can handle it, or my mom's going to be the wedding coordinator, or my maid of honor. As a coordinator, what's your advice?
I just encourage them to really take a look at what that date looks like. What do you think mom is doing, or a maid of honor? What do you think that their role that day should be? You have chosen your maid of honor to be your maid of honor for a reason.
Yeah.
Because you want her to be with you the entire step of the way on that day of. You want her there
Not to be preoccupied or handling
Exactly.
the stressful things that should be happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. She shouldn't be greeting the DJ and finding them extension cords because now they're setting up on the other side of the room because the catering team had to put a table where they originally were going to set up.
Right.
Now we're having to find all these extension cords. Your maid of honor and your mama should not be doing that.
I agree.
Your mama and your maid of honor should be in the bridal suite helping you get into your dress. And
Enjoying your day and creating
Yeah,
memories.
exactly.
And that's why we have a wedding coordinator.
Yep.
100% in
Yep.
agreement. If you were to take a snapshot of your job as a wedding coordinator and how many weddings have you performed now as a coordinator? Can you even count them?
Oh my gosh. Well, I just did so many in the first 5 or 6 years of my career because I was working for venues specifically.
Right.
So, I mean, in
lot.
1 year, I did 100 to 110 easily. I would say that I'm roughly around like 450 now.
Yeah. So looking at the overall, all of the weddings that you've done, when you step away from that and you look at them, what is it that makes your heart still sing? What do you love about being a wedding coordinator?
Oh, it's that feeling on the night of when you get home and you just know that that couple and that family just had the best day of their lives. It's the best feeling.
And you had a part in it.
Yeah, that I got to share and experience that with them, that I got to help create that moment for them. And it really is an honor for me to be a part of that day for my clients.
Right.
And with my clients. I always tell my husband when I get home from weddings, I'm not going to sleep for a little bit. I got to have a glass of wine. I have to decompress.
You have to unwind.
Because I am on cloud 9.
Yeah.
Having just seen what I got to witness today.
It is an amazing feeling to
really
have
is.
the completion of a wedding over and to know that, not that everything went perfect because we're not in control of everything.
Yep.
But that you are navigating those things, and that when there's a bump, that you have those skills and the ability to make the decision to make it look like nothing happened at all.
Oh, that's my favorite when I get
I love
home
it.
and I'm like, hey, guess what? This happened, but they had no idea.
I love that too.
They had no idea
I know.
that it happened.
Yeah.
But I took care of it and they didn't have to know.
Exactly.
They got to
Yep.
sit there and hang out with grandma for a few more minutes, or they really got to party down on their dance floor.
Right.
They didn't have to worry about the bar running out of ice and us having to go get more. They don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
I took care of that for them.
Yeah.
It's a really great experience.
So in the beginning stages, when you first start meeting with a couple, talk to me a little bit about when they come to you. What are some of the strengths that you share with them in the whole process of putting everything together, to include like vendors, and how do you help facilitate that for them to bring it
Sure.
together?
Yeah, so I personally offer a few different package options for them. And I
Okay.
also do customization. You know, if they're not seeing themselves in one of my predetermined packages, then let me help you find something that's going to be a good solution for
So
you.
what would a predetermined package look like?
So I have my event coordination. That is what some people deem or would call day of, but we're trying to not utilize that vocabulary anymore, because a true day of service where someone comes in the day of the wedding and is handed paperwork, an itinerary from a
Right.
client or a layout, that service just isn't realistic. And so what we found is that all that service has to start ahead of time, but it's still being called day of for some reason. So we're trying to get rid of that terminology. It's actually what I call event coordination, and my services start 2 months out. And that's what is a true coordination package. So then outside of that, I have planning packages.
Okay.
So I have a partial planning package, I have design packages, and then I have a full service package that it takes everything and puts it into one. The major difference between coordination and planning is that your coordinator comes in towards the end of your experience with your planning and helps you tie up all those loose ends.
And to put the things together that you may not know, like building the itinerary, what order should things be in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they're not in the trenches with you while you're planning.
Right. They're not helping you to pick out your vendors.
Exactly.
You're saying these are the vendors that I chose here. And then you're given, and then you're reaching out to them and building relationship to make sure that everything comes off seamless.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's going to happen a little bit closer out. Now, if you want a planner, if you want someone to be there by your side from day one,
To walk through meeting with your caterer.
yep, that would be full planning. I do a version of partial and full service, so that if someone is like, hey, you know what, I feel really good about my ability to take the reins and really run with this. I don't necessarily need someone to go with me to every vendor appointment. I don't need somebody to do all of the communicating for me.
The only ones you really want to go to would be like the catering and the cake tasting, because you get to sample. Right?
Oh, I don't always get those.
You're like, please eliminate me from all of them, but those, I do want to go to those.
I do love going to those, but not always. But no, with my partial planning, I just kind of map it out for them. So I say, okay, this is your roadmap. These are the vendors that you need to hire between this date and this date. This is when you need to be focusing on each vendor. Here is my recommendation for you for those vendor categories based on the budget that we've discussed and all of the aesthetics and all of the wants that we talked about. And that's customized to them. You know, if you do a coordination package with me, I'm happy to give you my full generic list of vendors, but that's not customized to you.
Right.
That doesn't, you know, you could be looking at a $10,000 photographer and you have a $2,000 budget.
Right.
So it's really important, if you want that customized experience, to have a little bit more direction. That's a planning package. So yeah, with partial versus full service, you know, the way I kind of describe it to people and explain it is that with your partial, I'm creating your roadmap and you're driving it. With full service planning, I'm your Tesla. So you're still in the driver's seat, you can still take the reins and you can pull over when you want to. You can slam on the brakes, you can do all of that, but for the most part, I'm going to be guiding you through the process.
They're getting bells and whistles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're getting all of the hands-on experience that they need, but that doesn't mean that I do make all the decisions for them.
You're providing them with a roadmap and saying, we need to stop here, we need to do this, we need to have this done by this time. Yeah, so that there's not last minute things that might have been eliminated or left out.
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, and I think also that in years past, having owned my own venue, I would have brides that didn't have a wedding coordinator and they didn't want to. And then it's 2 months before the wedding and they call me and they're like, we're having a hard time finding a photographer and it's a wedding in October. Like that's difficult.
It's a big
Yeah, you don't do that. Yeah. And that's another benefit of having a wedding coordinator with experience and contacts, because they're going to be encouraging you way ahead of the game.
Well, your planner would.
Yeah,
Your coordinator would.
planner. The planner.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting. Yeah, the planner is going to make sure months, 10 months, a year, whatever time frame that is, to make sure that those things are implemented and in place so that there isn't that, oh my gosh, what am I going to do?
Exactly. I've seen it happen so many times where, you know, we're coming to that 2 months out, let's sit down, let's meet, let's talk about everyone that you have hired. Can you send me all the contracts?
Right.
I always have my clients send me contracts prior to that first meeting with them when they're an event coordination client, because I just like to get familiar with them, make sure that I'm kind of starting the work so that when we get together, we're really going. And sometimes I'll just get the catering contract, and then they're like, well, my uncle's doing the wedding. He's officiating. I'm like, but who's your photographer? And who is this person? It's really important that you have these. Do you have contracts that I can review?
Right.
Because a lot of times you don't realize that the hours that you have booked your photographer and your DJ and your video, those really are going to help you outline your entire timeline.
Right.
Well, so yeah, it's interesting.
And things for you as well. You'll then know what venue, if you have been or haven't been, you can go visit. You can kind of walk around yourself. But if you don't know the DJ, and the DJ doesn't, there's relationships of trust that you build as well, that a lot of the people that you're going to refer and be talking to the bride that do a really good job are because you've personally experienced their professionalism. And that also, I think, is, highly speaks of the people that are on your list. Like we have a preferred vendor list. Crystal is on our preferred vendor list here at the Tegman House, by the way, and which we're really happy about. But I think it's important that you know the people that you're referring out and what they do, how they do it, and who they're going to be bringing in to that picture.
Yeah, that is very important. And just, I mean, even if I haven't worked with them before and I have a coordination client that says, okay, we booked this DJ. I'm like, great, I've never worked with them before. Let me take a look at their contracts. Let me see. Let me make sure that my expectations of what they're supposed to be doing align with what their expectations are. Right. Because if they don't think that they're emceeing, I can't be making announcements for them.
No, right.
So there's those types of things that all has to be taken into account and looked at. Right. Whereas if you had a planner throughout the whole process, if I'm planning with you, then I'm helping to make sure, like, 8 months out, we need to look at a DJ. Now, for your DJ, do you want them to MC? Let's make sure we put that into the contract. Right. Do we want them doing the ceremony? Do you want them doing cocktail hour? How many setups do we need? Like, there's so many times where we get to the coordination phase and they're like, oh, well, we only have them set up on the dance floor. I'm like, well, your ceremony is a completely different setup. And then you have cocktail hour on the other side of the village, like wherever you are. Right, so there's a bunch of different stuff, and then all of a sudden, that's another $400 that they're having to spend 2 months out. Right. So budgeting is another big thing. Right. When it's different with coordination and planning.
Right. Well, and I think a planner is going to think of the little things that somebody who hasn't done it before is going to think of. For instance, it's August, and your ceremony is outside, and there's no waters for the guest. There's no little water station or something that is courtesy and thoughtfulness to the families and to the people that are coming. Yeah. Yeah. The bride is just thinking about getting married, and it isn't that she doesn't want to provide waters.
She doesn't know.
Yeah.
She doesn't know.
And it's not until everybody's parched and, like wishing they had water, and now they're having to run from here over to the bar area that's not open yet.
Yeah, the bartenders aren't ready for that. Yep. Right. And that's one of the things that for KMW, for my company, what I pride myself on and what I strive for every single client is providing intuitive services that actually says, I know what you need before you know what you need. Let me guide you through this process. Right. To really help you understand and plan for instead of stress about.
Right. Because how many young girls, and I mean they could be young in their teens or 20s, but it could even be a 30 or 40-year-old bride. How many young people coming together have literally planned a wedding of 100, 150, 200, 250? I mean, it's a huge event.
And it's not like back in the day when people would have huge 200-person events at their house where people just hosted like that. We don't host those types of parties anymore. Right. We don't do that. And so this time is sometimes the one and only time you are hosting a party this size, and and it's your first introduction as a host as well.
And you want it to go smoothly, and you want everybody to have a good time and it to be memorable. Yeah. Yep. So what about picking a venue? Like a bride is wanting your full service, and what do you do to sit down to kind of guide and direct, to know after you've met with them, what kind of questions might you ask them to help? Like, there's lots of venues in the area to say, you know what, I think we should go here, here, and here. What are some things that you try to narrow down with that couple?
Yeah, always start with guest count. What's your guest count? And a lot of times they look at me like, oh, we haven't done that yet. I said, okay,
We need to do that first.
I encourage you to let's look at that.
Because the very first thing you want to book is your venue.
Yep.
Before you do anything, the venue is got.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you don't actually sit down and map out a list, and it could change 85,000 times, but that very first rough draft of a list that comes from your mom and comes from his mom, comes from whoever you're going to allow rights to invite guests, you put that together, that's your indication of, okay, now I kind of understand what size we're looking at. Otherwise, you're just doing 150. How did you get there? Where did that number come from? Right. It's really important to actually sit down and write out.
It may end up being that's only 100, but it could be 200.
It could be 200, and that's what I see more often than not is that people go to venues and they fall in love with how charming or beautiful and romantic and like lovely a venue is, and then they book it, and then they realize, oh,
can only do 100 people here.
Be 100 here. We'll be fine. And then it's like, okay, let's send out save the dates. We need your list. They're like, well, can we invite 250? Like, can we send out save the dates for 250? Like, no, you cannot. You cannot do that because your venue only holds 100. Right. So we've got to be very realistic. And
or you've booked your venue for 100. And then what if there's an upcharge, you know, because your venue may cover 100 chairs and tables and whatever, and you may not be reading the fine print that says for every person over that amount, they've got to provide a chair and a table and a linen, whatever is inside that contract.
Yep.
And obviously, so booking your venue, but then what is your budget?
Yep.
Like, what is the budget? Like overall, and then you can take that overall budget and then break it down. But if you don't know what the guest count is, you have nowhere to start.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep, I had that struggle with a client recently that her venue holds 200 and she is looking at 250 as her guest count. I'm sorry, it doesn't hold 200. It actually provides tables and chairs for 200. And it's not a problem. It can hold up to 250. Got it. We're totally fine there, but we have to source the tables and chairs. And the venue has a very specific style of table and chair. Each chair to rent is $10. So that's another $500?
Yeah, and that's not the tables, and that's not extra linen, and that's not extra centerpieces, and that's not.
So it's all those things that start to add up.
Right.
It starts to add up, and that's why working with a planner from the beginning, if you have the opportunity to, it really just sets you up on the right footing.
So, Crystal, what do you do when you have a bride and groom come to you and they're wanting to know if you offer special discounts to them with your list of vendors?
Oh, that's always a fun topic. That's a fun question.
That never happens, right?
I mean, never. You know, there are some, I'm not gonna lie, there's some vendors that are like, you know what, Crystal, we love working with you. You make our lives so much easier. We know that your timeline's gonna work. We know that you are taking us into consideration. We know you're gonna feed us. We know all of these things. So we will offer your clients specifically a discount. We'll throw in $200 of extra services or like what have you.
And if they're available and you go with them, then you're going to pass those savings on to the bride.
Oh, of course. That's always, that would be to the client only. Yeah. But that's few and far between, to be honest, because these vendors are pricing out their services based on what they need for their business. This is how they feed their families. This is how they have priced out their time. Like how many hours does it take to go in and edit photos, and what is that time valued for them? Right. And does that feed their family? You know, all of those things come into consideration. So they're not as willing to discount services all of the time. So my answer to that question is I may not be able to get you hard cold cash savings in the form of discounts, but what I will do is make sure that from day one you are prepared for spending. We go through the budget to make sure you're not getting anything, you're not having to spend any money that you don't need. Right. You don't have to go in and over purchase. Also, I'm going to make sure that you're set up for success when it comes through the whole process. Again, we don't want to get to 2 months before the wedding and we start talking about your timeline and you booked a photographer for 6 hours, but you need for 10. Right. So now all of a sudden it's another $1,000. Right. Where are you getting that $1,000? Because you 4 months ago were like, well, we're under budget. It's great. Let's spend all of this money on florals. Because you just don't understand. So It may not be in hard, cold cash discounts, but I'm going to make sure you're not making those mistakes throughout the process.
Right. And to make sure that things are delegated and spread out with that budget so that it makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my clients will tell you that I'm a little bit stern when it comes to budget until they tell me, Crystal, we're okay. You can back off. But I will say, okay, we said we have X amount of dollars in this category for vendors, and you're looking at vendors and you're really excited about this one that you fell in love with.
Right.
That is $500 extra. Where are we pulling this money from?
Right.
Where do you want to cut it? Do you want to cut it from your dress? Do you want
Right.
to cut it from florals? We can do
Or
anything that you want to do.
Which rich uncle do you want to call?
Yeah. Are we calling Uncle Bob? Like, what are we doing?
Because I'm not cutting my services, because as the wedding coordinator, you're probably spending more time with that bride than any other vendor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Even as just a coordinator, when you talk about a planner, I am your new best friend.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when the bride comes in and is on the day of wanting you to hang plants, do her hair, put her makeup on,
that we don't do. We, number one, we plan for all of that ahead of time. We know who's going to be hanging the plants and who's going to be. But when the question comes up, Crystal, can you hang the plants? The response is, no, I cannot. That is, we like to hire professionals and let them shine.
You're not going to make her bouquet on the day.
I can't. No, I can't. I've done it
You've
before.
learned to say no. I love it.
I've done it before. I've had U-Hauls show up of stuff. I've had buckets and buckets and buckets of hydrangea show up with empty vases, and I'm like, oh, I'm arranging these. And I've learned from those mistakes that it really hurts the client, because the client needs me available to be the overseer of everything. And if I am in a project where my focus is 100% there, I can't be that person to help the DJ find the extra extension cords. I can't
give directions to the minister who's come in from out of town.
Exactly. I can't be doing that whenever I'm stuffing all the bouquets. Like, I've done it. It's just not my go-to. So that's why we always have a plan for all of that. And, you know, honestly, if it's about just taking something and put it on a table.
Oh, sure. We're not talking about you not working. No, it is about literally doing something that should be taken care of by the vendor. Yes. And you're hired as the coordinator, and you want to be sure to keep the delineation of those boundaries very clear.
Yes.
And that clear boundaries bring ease, contentment, happiness, and a day that's going to flow really nicely.
Exactly. And it's also an opportunity for that vendor to shine.
Right.
You know, I want them, there's a reason why they do what they do. They're passionate about florals. They're going to make that bouquet so much better than I am. I'm not, I'm passionate about how pretty it looks and making sure it's in your hand before you walk down the aisle. But I'm not passionate about assembling it. That's not where my passion lies. So let's let the vendors shine, and they will do an incredible job for you. And we'll find one in your price point, I promise.
Awesome.
We'll find it.
Is there anything that you would like to share that we haven't talked about today that you would like to highlight, or?
I guess I'm trying to think if there was any other questions. I've had a lot of people ask me before, how many weddings do I do a year? And I think that's really important for brides to start asking their vendors and having a real idea and understanding of that they're either going to be the only wedding of the weekend or they're not. They're going to be one of four. I personally, my business structure for right now is that I only take on one wedding a weekend, and I
think that's wise.
I only do 2 or 3 a month, depending on the levels of service. I only do X amount of weddings that are full service planning. Like, I have a whole strategy of how many of each type of package that I take on and I execute, because I want to make sure that
you don't get burned out.
I don't want to get burned out. I've been there before. That's the whole reason I got into owning my own business and starting to do my own thing, is that I was working for venues and I was doing 120 a year, and I loved every moment of it. I loved getting to know all of those brides, but I wasn't doing them my full service that I could have been doing. I wanted to do more quality. So then I segued into my own business. But yeah, I don't want to burn out. I want to be able to, I want to know mom's name on the day of. You know, and I always call my bride's mom's mom, but I want to know their name, and I want to know who everyone is on the wedding day. I want to know what is important to you. I want to be able to be I want you to feel comfortable and confident knowing that I can answer questions for you.
Right.
That you and I have a good enough relationship where you're like, okay, Crystal's gonna know if I'm okay with this aesthetic.
Right.
Like if we get to the ceremony site and where the arch was going to go yesterday at rehearsal, well, now there's a big ant hill there, and she doesn't want me standing in my wedding dress in a pile of ants. So we're gonna shift it.
Right.
And I'm gonna know and trust that that decision came from a good place and like it makes sense.
Right.
So I think it's just always good to have that conversation with your vendors as you're booking them. And it is totally fine for a vendor to say, you know what, we have the scale to do multiple events a weekend. You know, florists are totally fine doing that. Catering teams are totally fine doing that.
Right.
There are plenty of planning companies in
Right.
Austin that are totally fine doing that.
Right.
You know, they have 4 or 5 planners working for them, and
Right.
they can divide and conquer.
Right.
But you need to know as a client moving into your wedding day, if your planner, if your photographer, if your
Right.
if your people that are serving you are just
Right.
serving you, if they have other things going on, you got to be okay with that, because the last thing you want to do is look on Instagram the next day and see that your planner that you thought you were having, or your florist that you
Right.
thought was just doing your wedding, was celebrating another wedding, and you're like, oh, well, you didn't tell me that. That
Right.
shouldn't be a surprise to you. You want to make sure you ask.
Yes.
If that's something you care about,
Right.
if that's something that the clients care about, I really want them to start
Right.
asking those questions.
Yeah.
Because I had an upset bride recently that was just like, I was just really bummed out that the next day I looked on Instagram and saw that so-and-so was, you know, talking about another wedding. I had no idea they were doing another wedding on the same day as mine.
Right.
And so how did they do that? It turned into this thing, and had to explain that it's okay. They have staff that divides and conquers.
Right.
You don't have to be upset about this. I understand that your heart's upset, but you don't have to be.
Right. Right. Right.
But it's a conversation that you don't want to have the day after your wedding or the day of your wedding.
Right.
So that's the only thing I think.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are truly glad you came out to visit with us. Thank you for sharing
Well, thank you.
all
I'm
of
honored.
your expert advice and your lovely smile, and you have just a precious heart.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I can understand why brides would see that strength in you and desire and want to hire you as their coordinator.
Aw, thank you so
very,
much.
very evident, and I've absolutely loved talking and having you share with me your ideas, and we are really looking forward to having you here working with us here at the Tegman House to
I'm
bring
so
your
excited.
experience here.
Yes, I'm
as well.
so excited.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So on that note, we appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully we gave you some insight into wedding coordinating and how to book your venues, and all of the benefits of the services that Crystal provides. And we look forward to seeing you again really, really soon. And thank you for joining us.